Let's see. Okay, so I did want to dig deeper into this computational history stuff. That's what we're going to do. But I did have a couple of other things. Yeah, so let's do this other. So the pudding. Pudding is cool, just like it says, right? So let's do a cool pudding thing. Look at it, it's so great. I mean, and I'm glad you brought it because this has long been sort of a great example of what's possible, right? And for many years, I've talked about papers being apps, and these are but it's hard to make things that last, So anyway, so good things. So this is so I thought we could do this. This is the latest thing. So you guys should, if you can. Oh, you've done it. All right, you're all good. Okay. Did you see it through? You just saw it. Yeah. Good. You follow putting on Instagram? Or your disinformation, which it never used to be, right? It was just cat pictures. All right,
We should bring it back to that. Nothing's stopping us from just like making like really bad stuff using 2012.
It's the stuff, yeah. Well, I do have the. But we watched it happen, right? Maybe you guys, I don't know how you. So pudding. What would I look up for pudding on Instagram? Now I've got puddings, actual puddings. That's not right. Dot cool, actually, yeah. Did they do that?
No, it's
the pudding. The like underscore or something, or the. Oh, it is the. Okay, this is important. Good for them. There it is with their little thing. Yeah. Yeah, they're not. It's not really a giant thing. I don't think everyone in the world knows about the pudding, but it's good. Anyway, but we'll try it, right? This is I've run things like this in class, and there's right, and it's been around for, yeah, there's been stuff around like this for a long time, and one of the classics in statistics, and I don't know if is that you get students to flip 100 coins for homework and write it all down, and then bring it in. And then the professor or whatever, the instructor at the front says, you cheated, you did it, you cheated, you did it. And yeah, you need to have, there's like a 50-50 chance of a seven, maybe? Seven in a row, somewhere. Just somewhere in this list. For 100 flips,
I thought it was like you'd see a uniform distribution of like a sequence of 3. So if you're to like look at every like 3, there's like a uniform distribution.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of tells. Yeah, right. And I think one of the useful ones is that people won't make a long one. That just doesn't seem random. I mean, it's pretty bad, but it's in the middle of 100. So, it's funny because I did once in this course years ago. I never really analyzed, but I got people to make a 10 by 10 grid and then write in 1 through 6. Imagine rolling a die in your head and see how you go. Anyway. It's just hard, right? So even though I knew that stuff, I mean, there's probably too many. I don't know. I don't think I've done a good job. That's terrible. But I really tried. I managed to get more complex, right? So the problem with that measure is it's like higher entropy, which it isn't complex. It's more unpredictable. Doesn't mean, like maximum entropy is randomness. Yeah. Which we could show for these story things too, by the way, which we've done in the past. But, the meaning, like danger and power type measures compared to, you can measure the entropy, right, of these through these windows. And that, because there's zip distribution things, it's not going to change much. A little bit, not much. So this was, I was really pleased to see this, right? Like, okay, so we're going to do this. It's very hard not to press the 1. This is really hard. And then you feel like, I felt when I did this one that I would ignore one of them. That was the best I could kind of come up with, to not do a 1. I don't know. But I had no idea. Like I'm trying to make up a thing. Oh my god! And that was the same as this. I sort of just did this, and I missed that one. Yeah, they think I'm under 60. Okay, I'll tell you the truth. Uh, I know. Yeah. So what it came, but this, if and you haven't seen this, right? Right. Yeah, this particular thing. Yeah. So what they're critiquing though was this study. This is amazing. This was really amazing. I don't know if you see this, right? Um, I thought this because I thought they were just sort of doing this thing that we've done, which is fun, and people can't produce randomness, which they are. Hello, which they are. So this was a little pudding thing. Did you see this? Oh no, I'm just throwing this straight at you. So pudding.cool, they had a nice little thing, and you had to flip a coin in your head. I think that was 12 of them, and you had to pretend, be random, no cheating. And then we had to do a die roll. And you had to be random. So I tried to do it. I did sort of try to be random. And then they're just clicking spots. 10 of these 9 spots, just click them. And you're trying to be random. And then it's like it says that, then there's this weird thing where it says, we guess you're under 60, which is like weird. And it turns out, this is the weirdest, and that's what they're sort of building off of, this study, which got this headline, which is that people's ability to be random peaks around 25 and declines after 60.
That seems like just
what?
That doesn't seem real.
I mean, all of social psych, it's just a disaster, right? Like, because people, yeah, and they're like, no, we do all the rigorous stuff or whatever. And it's like, no. I don't know. It's pretty weird. They go straight to the replication crisis. They talk about it. They're like, so what's happened is like no one has any trust in anything anymore. I mean, there are some of the old guard have written sort of these pieces saying, no, we're okay. Like this is, like there's no problem. Like I think Pinker and a few others, like nothing to see. It's all fine. Anyway, so they're like, okay, we're worried about things in general. We came across this sort of funny one, and then they, I just contributed again. They've got people putting, that was a genuine contribution, I think, right, to their study. And this would be non-random, which is low entropy is going to, I think, the measure they're using, and that would seem, of course, this seems more random than this.
That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't, right? I'm not being crazy, but like, isn't this a difference between like how likely we like are clumping together a bunch of sequences that we think look similar to each other in order to get these different piles, but they're each independent things, so they're all equally likely.
Well, this is the random walk, the great random walk problem, right? Like each random walk has exactly the same probability of being manifested. Depends what you sort of look for. If you look at where it ends up, that's a different game. This is like, it's the same with lotteries, right? Like it's the same. Each thing supposedly has the same. This is equally likely. This is that one particular thing, but this seems more because it comes from a bigger, like we associate a bigger collection with this, and this is special. This is also special because if you said to a machine and that was your favorite number in the world and you waited for it to come up, you'd be, just as sad as the person waiting for that number to come up.
It's like a person made that. Because if you know a person made that, then like of course like the bottom one was questionable. But like the computer could pop that out, no questions asked. Like,
well, let's see. So they're really okay. So they're going to do. They use the word complexity score, which is okay, and we have to say no. You can't use that term because there really isn't a good measure of complexity.
it is just entropy, right? Like how else do you measure like binary?
I think they're just measuring entropy. It must be down in there. Do they say it? They're just saying it's a complexity score. This looks like a log thing, right? So it's average of a log of, not the set, however they did it. And these are just two examples. So, and of course, so these were contributions, based on people's age. If you look at this and you take that away, I mean, we can't see the terrible problem with these density plots, right? You need a histogram thing to get a sense of it. But obviously, there's a lot of people who were bad actors, right? They just put 1, 1, 1, 1 or 2, 2, 2. Yeah. So this is what happens as you go down in this work. The scrolly stories, they're so nicely done. So the score I got was, where is it? Ah, that's pretty good. I mean, I was trying.
It doesn't make any sense to me, though. Like, if I type in all ones, that should
Yeah, but if you put all ones, they will put you down, and
I
yeah, they will go boom. They'll put you there. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, so what? I mean, you have to go back to what entropy is. Entropy. And poor old Shannon, 3 years after his paper, he's got the bandwagon paper, says, please come down, you maniacs. Like, this is a good thing. You've seen the bandwagon paper? Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, I'm so sorry. But, it's kind of gone on completely, not everyone's thrilled with it, and it sounds good, it's entropy. But, you're really saying, like, if this sample you have is, if we take that as like, this is the relative abundance, of this underlying kind of space of symbols, and this is what you expect to see from your sort of symbols that you're transmitting down some tube to someone, with listening at the other end with a string or whatever it is, right? Then the best thing way to encode it will be, right, the high probability ones will get shorter strings, and the low probability ones will get higher strings, and there's a log comes out for the number of bits. But that's doing a certain thing. Like that's like in the context of sending signals and expecting them to be uncorrelated and all those things. Yeah. So if it's all ones, easy. You just have one. You just have one symbol, and you don't have to really do much. Symbol for a space sort of thing. But if you've got a bit of everything, and of course the even balanced one is the one that's the most complex, right? So if you've got, if you put in equal numbers of heads and tails, is that what they're doing? Are they measuring something else than that?
I think they need to set it up like we put the numbers 1 through 10 written from ping
What's the
pong
complexity
ball
score?
in a hat.
Yeah.
How would you draw them out? Like, there has to be something like that.
The hat. That's much better than an urn problem, by the way. Such an ancient word. The urn problems, right? That's the balls in urns. For some reason, they have urns also for the remains of your forebears.
It has to be something like that with a pretty small number of things you're drawing from. Because otherwise, it's like,
without
yes,
replacement.
I have an infinite number of all of these numbers,
right.
So that it doesn't make any sense.
Well, look what they did. So they put this trend line. This is from the paper, and so this is where. So there's a thing here, and this is this 25. This is also when you become a human. This I think is actually true. So I thought of this years and years ago. Just in my head of getting older, I thought to myself, like, 25 is kind of zero. This was to make me feel okay about not being so old, right? Like, so, when I was 30, I was only 5 years old or whatever. But it turns out, at least, and women are like a year or two ahead, but for male, like, this is when your brain sort of, there's a lot of crazy development. Obviously, it keeps going. It used to be that, like, you've only got so many neurons, and if you lose them, don't drink or whatever, because, they never get made again. But this is also where, insurance companies say, now you can, we'll loan you a car. And that's, based on a lot of data. So that's sort of, and, so it sort of comes out, I think. So that's a weird coincidence, but, I don't know, that looks like it peaks at 30, which is, this is horrible. I mean, look at this huge variation here. Clearly there's something going on here with their measure too, those striations. Someone's choosing some kind of structure, some pattern that they're putting in.
At some point, you gotta wonder, even if you can find a test statistic that pulls this out as a pattern that's valid, like, is it actually anything?
I mean, look at this cloud of points, and they put a line through it. So if you go up and you take out, so that's what they do, right? If you take out the all heads, which is, this is, I hate your study, people, or whatever, I hate studies, then it does that. This reminds me of this just terrible work, and we simply just had a blog post about it. There was a whole paper on QWERTY and how words, this is to do with happiness, words that had more letters from the left hand, were happier. Yeah. So you've got a QWERTY keyboard, and then you have letters from this side, letters from this side. I guess there's sort of a balance. If your word had the more letters it has from this side, the happier it was, right? Because we have happiness scores for words. We didn't do this. Someone else did this study. And then there's so if you're branding, you should do this, right? Like branding, like you should have more letters, like E's, and it got really anyway. But it was one of these things where if you took out some stuff and you had actually more scores for words, that's what it was. Nothing, zero. Like if you had a larger lens, essentially, yeah, larger set of words, because it was a weird set of words. It was probably the ANU one, which is weird. It's just as weird as hell.
Like, how would you use that?
Well,
That's for branding.
yeah, but that's the problem.
For branding, it would just be so much better to use the individual scores of words.
But people, no, I know. Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Like when it was this file for every app to be like a made up new word. I think that's what they were.
And they go right, and there's the thing without the ER, right? You just put an R.
Which now makes you look dated.
Right.
So passe.
Twitter could have been, if they'd been a bit later, they would have not had the R at the end. It would have been just a TR at the end.
Which they now regret. Because it
They
was
regret
like in style and now it's out of style.
It's so funny. So this is amazing to me. This is so bad. There it is. Look at that. Oh, it's just the sadness. Oof. The coin toss one. Here's the coin toss one. I think it's the coin toss one. Yeah. How do I do with the coin toss? Where's my thing? Oh. Oh, that's coin toss. Sorry. This is, okay. I guess I was here. That's terrible, isn't it? This also means that, if you looked at this too, you'd think, this is this age group is overrepresented. Okay, methods. What's the complexity thing? Oh, it's done using, okay. Maybe they do something. Oh my God. All right. Okay, so it is an entropy. All right, okay. Well, that'll be a fun thing to look at, but we're not going to do it right now. Okay. Nice. Well, that's a profound question. Yeah. Random looking sequence and grid. Yeah. Okay. So they did something more sophisticated. Yep. So of entropy and lossless compression. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's good. So that was a fun thing. Anyway, what a mess to. Oh, did that just disappear on them? I have new backgrounds, for example. Sorry. I know this is, we're running out of our course. I did change things a little, it's not a big deal, but I sort of put the history of everything that's happened in these two courses is now sort of sitting over here, and it's got a warning saying that this won't make any sense for you. Because, I just sort of put these long form things up. Yeah, that's all the way back to the start of Pucks. Well, and I'm going to say it, we have Kitty's in the hospital, so we're really worried about Kitty. He was a bit sick yesterday. This charming fellow, he's getting imaged today, so hopefully He always eats, right? I mean, he's a cat, but he's never been off his food. It's one time before. So we took him in, and now he's in a, up in a hospital, and he's getting a CAT scan, I guess. Or echocardiography. So we'll see. Hopefully he's all right. But we're in a bit of a bad situation. I know, distress. Lots of distress. It's a very nice place, so hopefully it lives up to what it is claiming to be. Yep. No. So I know I was in this madness here. I got to this the other day, and I wanted to show you just how absolutely crazy this is. There is a website for this thing. Yeah, I know. It's bad. Trump stories, comp storyline. We've had trouble with our website. Okay, so this is there's a little. We make an online appendix. This is sort of in this realm of trying to make paper. They're not apps, but we've tried to do all this stuff. And the time series are in here. So there are these little booklets. I'll just get them off my computer. But these time series for the narratively dominant 1 grams and 2 grams at the day scale, 1 grams a day scale. These are huge booklets. So let's see if we can find those. I think it's here. Nope. That seems weird, but I have to do it to. Okay, so there's a stupid amount of work behind all of this, unfortunately. So let's see, and then ANC, I think is this stuff. Yeah, so let's go in there. So, for example, this is a flip book. Let me make it. Is it continuous scroll? Okay, it's not a flip book, I guess. It's a big scrolly thing. So I showed the other day just this sort of one figure, right? That's in the paper. That's just a set of them put together. All as you go through this thing, you can see 1 grams and 2 grams mixed together, and everything that to be included in this booklet, which is 15 pages of these time series, they had to have been sort of the narratively dominant 1 gram or 2 gram for at least 3 days. So they're things that popped up. The way it's structured is it's the word just underneath it. So, for example, Trump obviously appears in tweets with Trump, and this is how much. Sometimes there's more than one Trump, I suppose, in a tweet about Trump. And so they're early on. They're fine. How do I stop it? Yeah. There are all these things that we've seen before. You can see them kind of spiking and going away. This Clinton drops away. And they're ordered by their first peak. So you can kind of see here like these peaks. So a lot of things that are big deals and then fade away. This is emblematic of socio-technical time series, right? There are a lot of these spikes and things falling away. And you if you're sort of seeing stories or whatever it is coming in real time, like how do you react to, like, if it's Twitter, like all these hashtags are still to the top and or new words that probably will be gone tomorrow. Hashtags, if you look at hashtags by themselves, the churn of those things is ridiculous, right? They just people create things all the time. Very different to natural language. There's just all these very creative objects, but they're gone. The churn is really enormous. So all of this stuff, to start with, you can see these spikes are happening in 2016. Right, and they're all to do with running, right? So Ohio, women, so sort of spikes early on around Trump, has resurgences as we go along. Crooked Hillary, which was seen, you can kind of see all the way through popping up. Supreme Court, of course, which if we kept going out here, we would see more things based on the last day. But the thing to sort of see, yeah, a lot of things that don't spike. So here's NATO, which really matters. NATO not really connected to Trump a lot, and you can see it's actually him. He's talking about it a little bit. Da-da-da. This, of course, would come to matter with Ukraine, right, enormously. Anyway, so this is, I mean, I'm not going to force this onto you too much. We'll just sort of go through and see some things that pop up. You know, FBI, right? FBI was a big deal. Trump talks about the FBI a lot. Sort of want to understand what that is. The election, so blah, 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 huge things back here. Sessions was the first, what was he, Secretary of State? You know, I mean, Attorney General, sorry, yeah. Who was Secretary of State to start with? Which was part of this. Oh, oh yeah, Exxon, right? Yeah, what am I saying? Yeah. God, right. It's Rex Tillerson. Thank you. Right. Ivanka, you know, pops up less as time goes on. So it's sort of interesting as to whether, you know, like what stays attached. A lot of things just bounce, right? So there's a lot of stuff that bounces away. North Korea was a big deal for a long time, but real zero. 2020, of course, this is where coronavirus pops up. Meryl Streep was a big deal, you know, flat lines. The wall, right? And this is 16, 17, 18. So this is election time here. But, you know, really a big piece. And he's, you know, the orange on here is what percent, you know, what fraction of those mentions are due to retweets of Trump. So it's definitely something he was pushing. The ban is interesting, not really there. You know, I didn't clean out things like function words, so that Trump. There are a few function 2 grams that are gone, but yeah. See, transgender gets talked about, but Trump never uses that word. There's crazy things with Sweden. Was that the forest? What was it? That was Finland. Sweden was about, wasn't there something about the attacks in Sweden, which were made up? It was sort of this fictitious Sweden's going bad because of, you know. These are, in a sense, what you get with these 1 grams, 2 grams are characters, and then that you can go in and find the stories wrapped around them. So a lot of these, lots of little spikes, and this is all to do with this turnover, right? So that the cabinet turnover is kind of reflective of something, and what we'll try to quantify with this is just exactly what rate of turnover we have, at least through this sort of bizarre lens of Trump. Now, fake news, which we've talked about, but it is remarkable, right? It's really of all these things, really solely due to him. That's really amplified when he talked about it. It got a lot of, I mean, there's a lot. This is on the blue thing here. It's talked about a lot, but it's really due to him being amplified. So again, that kind of thin spike. So this is sort of, we're moving through 2017, which is this really turbulent time. Secret Service gets talked about. Now we've got Charlottesville, white supremacists. Joe Arpaio, right? He pardoned him, which was a sort of a, you know, how does that fit in with this? But changes the story. If you think it's not here, it doesn't pop up. But the thing with Charlottesville, right? This was, I mean, you know, it was a bad story for Trump. It wasn't great, right? I think he had some trouble with some press conferences, just speaking from, but by that Wednesday, this is Saturday and Sunday, by the Wednesday, it became about Confederate statues, which doesn't appear as a thing. But that's a detail which you can see in this sort of more complicated things we have. But that's a 50-50 thing. So that was, because the US, when surveyed, people don't like Nazis. Like, you know, it seems to be one of those things that, I mean, I don't know what to say, but it's like 90% of people will say Nazis are bad, which is, you know, good. They're also Nazis, yeah. Yeah, depends who's a Nazi, right? I mean, like Ukraine are Nazis, yeah, right. Yeah, right. So it is a bad thing, yes. but it shifts in terms of its definition. Texas gets talked about a bunch. Why not? And you can see a lot of these stories aren't sticking. They're not really sticking. Roy Moore, a little bit, and that's Roy again. And then that Our Country thing, which is very odd. It doesn't really start until after. It's something he seems to have kind of picked up because it doesn't start till after Charlottesville, and then that becomes kind of a powerful piece. Some of these are kind of lasting a little bit longer, right? So Shutdown was a narrative that got, you could talk about it. Adam Schiff talks about him a lot here. This is all to do with impeachment, but was brought up way back here, right? So they're ordered, so you can say, okay, Schiff is a big deal here, but it was first a big deal back here. Tariffs, hugely talked about. Biden really spikes only here. This is 2018, but of course becomes gigantic. Witch hunt starts in, see that one started pretty early actually, I suppose, but really gets its big sort of nod here, but it's 2017. Peters out, I would say. Giuliani, oh my God, Giuliani, weird, and Trump doesn't really talk about Giuliani, directly, which if you're Giuliani would be maybe a little sad, but picks up here. This is the Four Seasons thing, which is really hard to explain, but there it is. Border, blah, blah, blah. It's a big deal, big deal, big deal. Caravans is another one, that sort of would peak and then just go away. You can see these things that he's pushing on. Border security, this is Kavanaugh. I'll just sort of move into, this is 2019. Things were a little bit more quiet, but there's Jeffrey Epstein is a story now. Doesn't really take. New Zealand, this is just a terrible thing. This is an Australian man shot, murdered many people in Christchurch. Is in at least one mosque, I think. It was a terrible thing. Oh my God. I know New Zealanders are just better people. This is just Biden. I know this might seem tedious, but this is something you can play around with just to sort of see where things are. And then you get these big pieces here, like this is coronavirus. See how it sort of dies away. Pandemic, blah, 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 blah. Part of coronavirus dying away is that we start to call it COVID, capital C. Those tested positive. Mattis leaves or gets part of it. Wow, I don't know what this. Ghislaine Maxwell, American soldiers. So these are bounties, Russian bounties on American soldiers. That story, gone. Just gone. It doesn't come back. And as we sort of see, Portland was the big, you could really talk about it. The post office gets talked about, but not by Trump. A lot of these are not really Trump's, really not really talking about. But votes, yes, you can see the orange on the bottom. Georgia, Dominion, a little bit about COVID there, but all of this is after he's lost the election. And then eventually the capital, and he's not tweeting about it because it's gone. Anyway, so, and then it's going to be into these different things, like overturning. These are characters who were involved, like Ashley Babbitt is here, Mark Meadows and so on, Rittenhouse. These are not directly connected to him. Say it again.
The red is his tweets.
Yeah, the piece underneath represents, so you'll see that, like, there's really huge ones for like this, right? So border security. He doesn't. He does, but he doesn't have to. He doesn't. Well, he doesn't like his name Donald, so he doesn't really say that. And they're sort of ordered. So Trump was back. The big Trump one was here. He does. Right, there's a little bit of orange down here, but that's by other people, which is what you want. This is really what you want. That's his thing, branding. He would get his name on stuff without, yeah. So it's real success there. Anyway, so that's a long thing. I did want to just sort of try to explore this because they are mad. It is madness. Okay, so not this one. I'll just show you one of these. This is day scale. Yep. Let me go to this one first, I think. Yeah, so this is a monster of a thing. And this is the day scale. This is the top. Well, no, I guess we'd want this one first, maybe. This is just simply this monstrous thing where you just go down like this. This is every day. It's every day. And it's the top 10 words, the narratively dominant words. And I'll just show you a little bit of this. And again, the pink bars are like, this is 86. This is how much of it is him being amplified. So this is where we get to see what are the sub stories that he doesn't talk about. So you can sort of just as a whole, like how much pink there is. Like this is a time where he's having some input. It's to do with Israel a little bit and so on. So this is a messy thing. Assange is in there. You know, these things don't necessarily get up to the week scale. This is Pakistan is being talked about, or he's being amplified. But I wanted to take it down to, so this is a monster of a thing. Okay, 2021, I went too far. Okay, so let's look at coronavirus. Right, so Parasite, I mean, it's just, this is a detail, this is all the madness of what happened. Parasite, right, wins the Oscar, the film. And Trump was, said this was bad, basically. So got involved with it. Before that, he's telling Bloomberg he's small. Blagojevich, he pardoned him, and so on. And then all of this is tied. There's stuff tied to the Ukraine impeachment. So Vindman testifies. You can see in here, like that's from a tweet from Trump, right? So it's like, so we've smashed it all into little pieces. So that's all that's kind of left of that one.
Surveillance spelled wrong is probably directly from Trump, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So 87.6% of what we measured were direct retweets of a Trump tweet. Others would have been quote tweets or copies or something. Someone's copied it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Spelling is a bit of a tell for some of it. Especially that dreaded apostrophe in it. It's a brutal. I mean, you have to concentrate, but it's such a. So this is like, these are the narratively dominant 1 grams, right? And so people sort of, I think, have really forgotten about this, but Trump went to India here for a couple of days. It was a state visit. And what had happened is back up a little bit. We have a paper on this. So it's all the trial, all of this Soleimani. So embassies, Benghazi, Soleimani, right? Iran. So all of this is like, I'm going to say, is pushing away from the story of the impeachment, which was going. And then this is back to impeachment, Lev Parnas, trial, the former ambassador to Ukraine, Bolton says some things, so on. So it's back to this. And then, so all of this is really to do with it. Then there's this trip to India. And then suddenly it's like, oh, by the way, there's really a pandemic. Which, does it exist back in here? Like, it would have been about the middle of, can you see coronavirus in here? I don't know. And this again is around Trump. Like, it's not really, it was news. It was this giant news across the world that China had something was going on. And then everyone sort of stops paying attention. And then this is what happens for the next, from the end of February on. And so you can see, right? So Trump never uses the actual word. He does here, he's a capital C. So there's a little bit of that here. This is the dominant one. Hoax is there, virus, right? There's going to be some negative stuff in there. I mean, yes, variant spelling. Chinese is here, right? So this kind of thing pointing towards it. But all of this is here. Fauci appears. I don't know if is that the TV show, probably. We're talking about ventilators, and then the old HCQ. Of course, this would just what's the stuff for horses? The ivermectin. Ivermectin.
It's an antibiotic.
So they're talking about it, so just this, there's nothing like this in this, of course, in recent history in general, but this is just coronavirus all the time. There's some, Flynn pops in a little bit, doesn't make it to the week scale, but this is Mike Flynn being talked about, right? Plague, calls it the plague at this point. And then you're going to see it kind of break here. What's that? Yes, that's the one. That's really one of the ones I want to show you. Like, if you look at this, right, it's all coronavirus. And if you look at the things that are really popping up, like, as you point out, I think up here, right? Yeah. HCQ is here. That's Liberate Michigan, which would, stories matter, right? Like, the whole sticks and stones thing, well, the stories make it happen. Obamagate made it to, where was it again? Here, it was really, really strong, but didn't make it to number one. Reopen, Obamagate, Wisconsin is here, like this. But also here, mail ballots booth, right? That's being talked about by Trump back here in May, sowing these sort of seeds about the mail-in piece. Lame stream. That's all Trump. What a time. And then there's this massive transition, and it's George Floyd's murder. So that this is about Twitter censoring right-wing people. That's what that was about, I think. But then this is George Floyd's murder, and now you can see Trump is actually being talked about, is actually contributing to that. This is a huge amount. And then Antifa, which I'm not sure the first appearance of Antifa. We have it, but then it just sort of goes on and on and on. This is when he was supposedly in a bunker, right? And Mattis comes out and says things and gets talked about. But then it sort of goes back into some sort of turbulent period. Ghislaine Maxwell pops up. Rushmore. Trump wanted to be on Rushmore. Kanye West is here because why not? But you can see this sort of, right? This was, I would say this is a real gift rhetorically to fund the police. This is trying to get back to the NFL. That was a good one. Kneeling, right? That always seemed to work. This was open our churches kind of thing. And that's to do with, well, it's a bit after Easter, but that was the idea. They wanted to have it. So you see, now it's broken, right? But this was just the dominant story for so long. And now it's broken, and now there's a lot more kind of pink in here. This story did dominate, didn't have much control over it, but that's again the Russian bounties part. That was kind of bad. Herman Cain dies because he goes to a rally. Portland protesting. Trump talks about that. He also talked about Herman Cain to some extent, but anyway. Yeah, but this is sort of this tableau of like, not exactly what happened, but just sort of keywords into madness, like a historical madness, which I'm not going to say it's not going to churn again, but anyway, this is now into the election is in here, right? So there's vote, blah, 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 ballots. The transition starts to get talked about. And then you can see this is real shouting, right? Votes, Dominion, they've keyed on the machinery. Georgia becomes a focus. Arizona is a focus. So lots of amplification of that. And something about the vaccines as well. Moderna, just sort of saying like we helped. But you can see all these things. Certify, right? All this kind of like rigged. There's our old friend rigged. But real focus on Georgia, and then then we get locked into another story, which is the insurrection. Amazing story the other day. The first police officer, ex-police officer, I guess, who's been convicted, was found guilty, and one of the things they focused on was video of him attacking a police officer. And he has a line in his defense, which was, because the safety danger thing is kind of everything. He said the police officer came towards him. He was an ex-NYPD guy, right? So this insurrectionist was an ex-NYPD guy. He thought that cop might have been a rogue cop, and he, the insurrectionist, at this point feared for his safety, which is an amazing flip of the situation, which is right. Anyway, it's hard to, there's video of him really hurting that policeman. So the insurrection, it has to be called something, right? I remember Wikipedia, in the days afterwards, because we try to annotate our thing, hedonimeter with the right, not the right, but something consistent with how things are defined. And I think they just called it an attack. And then it turned to being called an insurrection. So you see that goes on. And then it changes a little bit. Marjorie Taylor Greene becomes a bit of a story in here. Well, she was potentially involved, and it spreads around a little bit. Lara Trump is in there and so on. So this becomes messier as things go on. But the big thing to see here is, here's the pink. And now it's gone, right? Because there are 0 retweets of Trump. It's a big difference. It's a big difference.
All less capital letters.
Spelling is a little bit better. And I don't know. We sort of have, we stopped at the end of 2021. Could all start again, depending on what our
new father, Elon Musk.
What do we have to call him? Oh my God. It's so interesting. He's really thought to be like the great genius, right? Who invented AI and electric cars. And he's the narrative for him. I've been listening to this, this is gonna be ridiculous for you, but a Buffering the Vampire podcast, which I quite enjoyed. But it's like back in 2017. I think they're doing the second season in 2017. And they just bring up Musk for some reason, and they're like, oh yeah, he could do the AI. Like they talk about him as if he's the guy who does the things. It's just solid,
There's a behind the bastards on Elon Musk.
Behind the
bastards. It's the podcast can be a little annoying sometimes, but they do
What's a podcast?
The one on some podcasts. The one on Elon Musk is interesting.
Okay.
They go into how he sort of bought that story.
Yeah, full credit to him. Why not? Pretty good. It's pretty good.
Why not? Because it's shitty and dishonest.
Oh, well, yeah. But he's seeking power and money. I'm not saying I think it's terrible. I think it is absolutely terrible. But, the path he's taken makes sense. It's bad. On the Bugle, which is Andy's Ultimates, what John Oliver used to be the co-host for the Bugle years ago. Still my favorite podcast, but every time they bring up Musk, which has been a lot, in the last 10 or 12, Andy's Ultimate was like the obviously fictional, space alien Elon Musk. It's because it does sound like he's Elon Tusk.
That really good Onion article about Ted Cruz that I don't know if anyone else remembers this, where he ends the interview.
Everyone hates him.
I have to go inside and mist my thousands of glistening eggs with Mountain Dew.
Oh, I don't know.
It's so good. It's such a perfect image.
Anyway, I think that just visually, I kind of want to have this in front of you. Like, let's just I'd love to be able to scroll through this automatically, but you know what I mean? Like, is there a way to smoothly scroll through it? Who was talking about having the roller thing the other day? That's what we need. So I can't do it.
Really hard to read.
I just wanted sort of just visual. You can see like there's less of Trump there. Like I think it's pinker again.
I don't know. This makes me
You're upset.
nauseous.
Okay,
So
I'm
I
sorry.
don't know.
I'm
Like
sorry.
I think if you made it like that, no one would be able to read it.
I don't want you to read it. I just want to like get. Yeah, I don't want you to read it. I want you to just get an overall feel of like, because then it's like you can see it. See how it just exploded again, and then
Maybe if you took it at one layer out of abstraction, where it was like you combined the colors at a slightly higher level and then did that.
this one is the top word. It's a bit tricky because it's each row, each column is a year. The ones that's in the paper is the week scale. So that's like, you kind of need to go down each column.
Like, what if you just summed all the colors for the first 10 words and then showed that with no word?
Oh yeah. So I mean, you could have the whole. What's that? You, you want this one? Yeah. I mean, these are just the top 10 words. There are tons of other words, so you could just do the whole thing. Like how much of his stuff is.
The second one you showed is confusing because when you scroll down, it's not going by times.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is hard. No, I agree. That is harder to understand. There's figure one. So this is the one. Well, a version of what's in the paper. Is that right? It's not filled out completely here, but this one is compact, and you can look at it in one go. Um, which I know I said it, but I just want to add it again. It's a nice detail. The last week of the year has 8 days. That's what's going on there. And then every leap year, which is 16 and 20, we add an extra day in that at the end of February. So there's an 8-day one in there. So it means, because calendars are insane, right? But it does mean that, across here, this is the 15th to the 21st. Boop, 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 boop. It is the 1st to the 7th across all of them. They have different weekdays. They start with different weekdays, but at least some things will match up. Some normal events. You can think of the doomsday method. Yeah. All right. I mean, I think you're asking the sort of the right questions. Like, so let's try to. Right. So this was just a sampler kind of thing, and then this is one way of condensing all of this, and in fact was the motivation for the work in the first place, right? So it's a long way to get here, but this is what I was trying to build from the start, which involved creating tons of stuff. So let's see if there's any payoff for you at all. Probably not. Okay, so the top figure is sort of this main one. So what we're going to do now, instead of comparing each day to the year before, we're going to say we'll do a range of them. And there's this so the thing to focus on to start with is this logarithmic scale here. So every day, and this is January 2016, we're going to compare the zip distribution for that day to the zip distribution for the day before, and then measure the rank turbulence divergence. So there are lots of ways to measure these, the divergence between distributions. That's what we established this one for, because we're going to compare ranks. And this is what sets it apart a little bit from the topic thing, because now we care about how different it is. So it's not just we got all these words out. A lot of that was to show like, oh, this is something you can look at and understand, and the words are there. We can see this sort of history in a strange atomized way, but that's a computational history thing. So now we're going to leave the words aside and say, okay, how different are zip distributions from day to day, and then data 2 days before, 3 days before. This is a roughly logarithmic thing. 4 days, of course, a week, 2 weeks, out to 8 weeks, and then what is kind of a quarter, and then 6 months and 1 year. So we're going to compare, we're going to look back in the past. So the idea is, let's say for 28 days, we look at all of January, we go to a day in January, and we look at 28 days before, and then we go to January 2nd, we look at 28 days before. So there's a lot of calendar stuff, 28 days before, and we just combine all of that month to say, this is how different January looks to 28 days before. But it's each day specific. And the colors are to show you how different they are. So this is, again, it's all the words surrounding Trump. So there's a lot of change. We're comparing back to 2015, January 2015. There's a lot of change in here, right? Lighter colors means a higher change, according to this measure. So that makes sense. Now he's running. He's doing something quite different. So there's a fair bit of change for him in 2016, although at the smaller timescales, it's fairly, these are slow. So this darker color means slow. And the numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means as you go across each row, there's a 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the slowest 5 days, the slowest 5 months in terms of 1 day turnover. And as you go across, like the 1 year turnover, they're numbered up here. So the slowest 1 year turnover is June 2019. It looks the most like a year before out of all of the months. Yeah. So they're just little labels, just because. So darker means more similar, lighter color means more different. And we're just going to indicate which ones are the top 5 most similar months at each of these different time scales, looking back. Yeah. Which is true across all of them. It's hard to discern, right? But this one, if you go into the actual numbers, this is the April 2020. It's the slowest in terms of looking backwards.
It's the most like or the least like?
It's the most like.
It's the most like, okay.
Yeah, which means slowest turnover.
This is like a combination of all of the days in that month.
Mm-hmm. So it's looking back to some of the days in, of course, mostly looking back to days within April. It's always just the day before. And in fact, that April sticks out because it's got the second slowest turnover at the 2-day scale, 3, 4, 7, up to 28. And then it turns out to be a bit faster because this is all looking back, right? Coronavirus starts at the end of February. This is basically April looking back into this time period. It all seems the same, relatively. Because everything is coronavirus. Everything is coronavirus, right? We're just talking about it. There are other things coming in. There's Obamagate is sort of in there, right? There's other stuff. But this month seems the most. However, once you go out to like a year, April 2020, it makes sense, right? April 2019, right. So that's going to break. At that year scale, the slowest turnover is actually in the 2019s because if you look back a year, Trump's president, there isn't as much turnover. There's massive turnover in 2016. There's massive turnover in 2017. When, he's now president. A lot of stuff happened in this year. So that's going to sort of push this one as well. But you can see that kind of darker color up there. This 2019, not as much divergence from 2018 at the year scale.
And this still has to do with the words Trump is using.
So it's all the words around. So the simple thing we've done is take every tweet that contains Trump. It doesn't mean that he tweeted it. Yeah. So that's what that narrative control thing was a measure of, which is how much of it is actually due to him. Yeah. So May is slow as well, right? It's kind of slow. It starts to pick. It's not so slow at those small time scales relatively, although it's still slow. But it starts to, there's a 3 and a 2 and a 4 here. It's starting to get slower at these longer time scales because May also looks somewhat like March as well. But George Floyd is murdered at the end. This is terrible. Happens here. June explodes. So you can see there's a lighter color here. And then these 3 months, it's the summer and coronavirus comes back and Black Lives Matter becomes the solid story. So now you have these 2 major stories that just dominate everything. And that really stays for a long time, even up to the end of December. So some of the slowest, is that 4 weeks? Yeah, that's 4 weeks. The slowest 4-week turnover and the slowest 8-week turnover actually in September, because now you're looking back to August and July, and that summer is just like it's all the same. This is trying to quantify the sort of statement like time flies when you're having fun, or or yesterday dragged on forever when you're not having fun, all of those sort of anecdotal things. And so it's a made up word, chronopathy. It's a quantitative measure of chronopathy. But it's collective as well. It's like collectively, how did time seem to speed up or slow down? Once we get into at the end of September, that's when Trump has the debate with Biden and tests positive for COVID. And then it's just Barney Bananas, crazy town, banana pants from then on. And you see that yellow comes back in there because there's the election, there's all the turmoil after it, there's the insurrection. And another impeachment. It's just explodes. So what this is, these are three comparisons. So now, time is nonlinear, it's timey-wimey. So we can peg some things and then see like how different, which days which months kind of seem similar. So this is, if we look at April in 2020 and we have to think about a memory distance. So we're going to say, let's look at 2 weeks back in April of 2020. So that's the peg, right? And that's what that little white box is supposed to be. All of these other bars here represent how many days you needed to turn over or had to pass before you got this kind of effective turnover, right? So stories have really slowed down in April. It's all coronavirus all the time at the 2 week scale. And if you go back pretty much it's somewhat slow also in March, right? It would take 4 days to get this much sort of story turnover. It's slow again here in August and September. But if you go back into 2017, which was just things, it took just 2 days to get that same separation in the zip distributions. Does that make sense? So you can't say April was the slowest month. You have to always say April with some kind of memory. So if you try to think about what happened 2 weeks ago in April, and compare it to today, and you're not comparing about 3 days or 4 days or 28 days, 2 weeks ago, if you kept a journal or you sort of could see yourself then or think about then this is how it compared to all of these other months. And these are, it's really different, extraordinarily different. This one is now 100, this is 56 days in May 2020. So that's this one. And this starts to lift things up, right? So now this is 7 weeks in May. Still back in here, it's only order of a week. So what you needed 7 weeks to get through in terms of story turbulence, you would need on the order of sort of a week in 2017. So 7 weeks go by, or you look back at 7 weeks before you in May 2020. If you could transport yourself back to these months and think back 5 days or 4 days, it would feel like the same kind of turnover. So, time is slowing down here. Things are getting stuck, and it becomes increasingly stuck in these months, right? Again, this is July, August, September. What seemed like 7 weeks here actually feels more like 110 days here.
Why are there these bursts?
So it's trying to kind of get something out of this sort of, it's really all connected to that, right? So another way to do it would be kind of draw a line through, you could have these contour lines of which months are the same.
What's causing time to work this way? Why are there these burst patterns appearing at all?
So
how did you get them from the graph? But why do they exist?
Yeah, because the same topic or the same topics or the same kind of words are being used enough, right? So
yeah, but why is that happening in this pattern?
You mean the bottom one necessarily? Like this? So this one is clearly coronavirus. This is coronavirus and Black Lives Matter. This is coronavirus again. And if you have to go back into the past and look at those stories that were sticking, some of it's like the shutdown was a sticky story that lasted for a while. Mueller's in here as well, more in this time that started to stick, and Ukraine, that becomes a pretty, that this is the impeachment, right? So there's some memory happening in here. Soleimani's assassinated, and then you start to get real.
Like these on the bottom are like kind of the same size and shape as each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but they're different stories.
Do you
right?
mean you mean like the way it sort of goes like that?
Yeah. Why is that what is happening with these different stories? Like not
Yeah.
going back in and dissecting.
Yeah, I see. I mean, it's a really interesting question. I don't know, like, in general. I mean, this is a tool we could use for anything, right? But part of it is like you've got a new president, so stuff is probably going to happen. There's some whatever, and it's probably going to slow down a little bit. That's sort of a background thing, although I don't have graphs for that. There's also just exogenous world events that may or and in some cases things like the slowdown, the shutdown, they're created internally. There's a midterms here, which is going to matter, like things sped up around that, perhaps, right? You could point to this. Generally speaking, things are getting a little bit slower through 2018. This part of doing all of this was just like it was impossible to kind of remember what happened through here, and this was sort of an effort to do that. If a story's unfolding and it's going to, that's the thing. I find it's hard to predict what's going to stick. It is really hard. You can certainly see historically attempts to break stories, like Obamagate or something like that. Why would it build up? So this is August, 6 months before in August. That's the anchor in here. So that's August, goes back into February. So it's going to have some of coronavirus and those pandemic words that are connecting it, which is weird. And if we think about the middle of, so that's the thing, you have to try and remember everything. So the middle of August or July and August in 2018, we'd have to dig back into that. Greenland is here, right? Which is sort of a funny business, which it sort of suggests like things aren't as intense, right? Because the dominant story is buying Greenland. It's like and overall too, there's just this background of how much Trump's being talked about, which was just all the time, compared to Obama, which is Biden, which is much more spiky.
So maybe part of it is like we just can't sustain a story for that long. Like it stresses us out too much.
It's really hard.
We have to break it up with something like Buy Greenland.
I mean, we're waiting for new things. Absolutely, it's really hard, and I think that's always it's a massive problem with like aid relief. Something terrible happens in the world. Organizations say, "Oh, we need money for thing. Here are the terrible pictures, like Ukraine right now, right?" But the longer it goes on, the less spike it has for people, and they're like, "Oh, it can't, whatever," right? Like my existence is still the same, or something like that. So that's an understood problem. Like, how do you maintain? It's why it was part of the motivation for one of our papers, which was on how much hurricanes are talked about. Like, what's the memory for hurricanes, and then how does that connect to how much money is put in there, how much damage? It's a pretty messy thing, to be honest. Yeah. I think in politics, people talk about the news cycle all the time, right? And like the weekend matters. People will forget. You try to bury bad news on a Friday. It's all, I'm not saying it's good, but it's all reasonable. And I think that 2-week tick in a way for Trump is good. Like that thing where he'd say, we'll see in 2 weeks, because I think it's a reasonable like correlation length, it exceeds our correlation length in memory. Like that's a couple weekends. Something else is going to happen, and people will forget about it.
How does this one particular plot take you to make?
It is. It is. I mean, this was, yeah, like it's several years of work basically went into getting to this thing. And I know it's like, but and all these other papers, it's a long time, a disturbing, upsetting amount of time. Oh, there's nice little ticks. Like, I don't know. Some of these things are like 1,000-hour projects, which sounds wrong, but it's true. This is completely bespoke madness, right? So all of the little details, like the colors in the backgrounds for the years. This was a nice little thing because how do you label calendars well? There's just a nice little space in there for the year, right? Because these are shorter. They have shorter things, so I be able to like scoot that in there. That was kind of a nice little. There's a very specific detail, and of course, I don't know about other languages, but that was a nice little thing. Yeah, no, it's this one was called. Let me make myself feel absolutely terrible. So it's change. If you see this like 050, there's sort of how many iterations there were. This one, it's Time Warp. Is that the one? Time Warp. And they go through different names. They go through. Yeah, that's okay. So there's that one. So let's see. They might not. It will be called something like this. So if I go to where do I keep that? That's in work log figures. Yeah. So those two figures were iterated at least 2,000 times. Like that. There's a log for each time I try to make it. I know. It's actually very upsetting. It's very upsetting. I don't know. And maybe this won't hit with people, but it is published now and so on. But it was trying to measure something weird. And the narrative control thing, the orange here, that sort of popped up as a possibility, and it's a function of Twitter being what it is with retweets and so on, and then getting these to work. Yeah, I know. Yeah, these ones, that was a lot of work. There's like 6,000 lines of MATLAB, and it does like kitchen sink type things as well. It's a little crazy. Kitty. I'm going to check to see if there's a message. No. Okay.
It's National Teacher Appreciation Day today.
Well, that sounds like a made up. That's clearly, yeah. That's clearly garbage. This is a slide that I've had for. We'll be back on Thursday, but that's sort of in some ways a bit of a finish for that computational history thing. I mean, it's not, what we want is like, this is really, like, this is a story, say, I mean, maybe it is, maybe that's enough, right? This is a story, and this is how much is being talked about. Let's try to get that out automatically. This is one version of that. Capital, right? I mean, in history, that is a story, right? And it's like, it's in some ways what this does is gets you an event or a person or a place or a character and associate, and then you get sort of the volume around it. So it's a bit of a dream, and that's what this sort of list of things here is. We want this science of stories, which of course everyone says, well, we're doing it, but I mean that big data distant measurement thing that I idiotically calling telenomics. And it's floating around. Like stories are everywhere. What's the John Dory is like. Actually, when I was in Ireland, one of the students there, I guess he looked at my slides and he was excited about these things. So the rhyming slang. He saw Barney Rubble and so that's nice because it's a madness, but it's definitely I guess it's a Cockney thing originally. And anyway, and you say someone's lost the plot or the thread, or I grew up with that. People saying, "Well, what's the story with this thing?" Like it could be a tractor or something. Which is funny. Like, what is the narrative of the and there's this sort of stuff, this real-time and offline extraction of all of these things. This is such about the frames. How are things being talked about? I do think the Uziamata stuff is really, I can't stop thinking about it as being this really crucial part to all of it. You just see over and over and over again people talking about danger and safety, danger and safety. This police officer who was, suddenly being assailed by a seemingly rogue police officer, and felt his safety threatened, which is amazing. Anyway, but these story scopes or whatever, like something that we're sort of piecing them together. How do we get those objects? And we have a big grant we're putting in now, which will be 20 million over 5 years to So SOX, the study of online corpora, change the C from collective corpora, knowledge, and stories. And it would basically be Story Wrangler gone berserk. It both won't measure everything about stories, but will also go beyond stories, right? So you could put the baby name stuff in there, or music. I think music would be such an interesting, right? It's a temporal corpora. It's ordered. There's some structure. You want to see the sequence of things, and I think what we've been trying to unlock for all this time is like all of these distributions that people play around with. There are words in there, right? And we tend to try and measure like entropy or complexity or whatever those things are, and then not really say not get the words to talk, right? Not like bury them. And so a lot of the stuff we're doing, you just showed you these insane PDFs, right? I mean, they're trying to surface the words and put them in front of you, and give you feelings. Anyway, so all right. Well, we have one more lecture, one more experience on Thursday, and then you get to escape. All right. Pox 3, the poxening, the extra pox, bonus pox.